You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our dinner and dialogue gathering on July 8th, 2026. Thanks for tuning in. Have you ever wanted to just freeze a moment in time? I think about this almost every day now, especially with my youngest daughter, Marlo, growing up. Like, there's these ordinary moments where she's singing and dancing in the back seat, or falling asleep next to me on the couch, or asking for one more song before bed. And somewhere, kind of right in the middle of these moments, I become painfully aware that she will never be this little again. It almost catches me off guard. Do you know what I mean? And then I turn and I look at my older boys. My oldest used to be the little one, Now he's growing into somebody entirely different. And sometimes the contrast between who he was and who he is now feels almost too much to hold all at once. Have you ever experienced that, where you're standing fully in the present, but at the exact same time, you're aware that the moment is already disappearing right before your eyes? It's a strange feeling, isn't it? It's beautiful and tender and almost holy. I think that's part of why photographs become so precious, because they seem to freeze time. We frame them, we collect them, we hang them on our walls, we fill our phones with thousands of them, and yet they don't actually stop time at all, do they? They simply remind us that time cannot be stopped. There's no pause button in life, and there never has been. So tonight, I want to suggest something that's become increasingly important to me over the course of my life. Perhaps the sacred isn't found by escaping the passage of time. Perhaps the sacred is found precisely in becoming aware of it. And even more than that, perhaps the sacred emerges as we learn to participate in the becoming of things. Because the truth is, we cannot change the past, not 1 second of it. We can only actually change how it lives inside of us, or how we relate to it, how we understand it, how we see it, how we allow it to continue shaping us. The same is actually true of the future as well. We cannot guarantee that life unfolds exactly the way we hoped. We can't ensure that the people we love stay healthy. We can't guarantee that our dreams will work out. We can't control the economy or elections or relationships or aging or even death. All we can really do is participate in this present moment in such a way that the future bends, however slightly, toward love. Does that make sense? That realization has actually become strangely freeing for me, because it means I don't have to carry the impossible burden of controlling everything. I only have to be faithful to what's alive in front of me right now. Years ago, I came across a quote by Questlove, who's the drummer of The Roots, that has stayed with me ever since I read it. He was talking about collecting things, like toys or records or baseball cards, little treasures we collect from our childhoods. And he said, a collection begins as a protest to the passage of time, but it ends as a celebration of it. And I just love that, because if you've ever seen my office, you'll know exactly what he means. My shelves are littered with baseball cards and old toys, these little objects that remind me of different chapters of my life. And when I was younger, I think I held on to those things because some part of me wanted to preserve what had been in order to slow time down or something like that, to keep something from disappearing, in essence. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Those objects stopped reminding me of what I'd lost, and instead they started reminding me of how beautiful it all was. What began as an attempt to resist time slowly became gratitude for having lived through it all. Every object became evidence that life had happened. Every memory became proof that love had existed, and every past was once a present moment, a moment when infinity somehow became finite. And when beauty took on a particular shape in a particular time, in a particular place, a moment when love became tangible for just a little while. And maybe that's all any of our lives really are, this endless series of moments where the infinite keeps becoming particular and possibility keeps becoming reality. Have you ever noticed that the past and the future feel emotionally different? Like the past often carries with it a kind of wistfulness, And the future carries this anticipatory feeling. Why is that? Well, maybe it's because looking backward always includes some awareness of loss. Something that was here is now gone, but looking forward always carries the possibility that something new is waiting to be born. Process thinkers like myself remind us that both are always true. Life is always letting go, and life is always becoming. Every ending is making room for a beginning, and every beginning contains its own ending. And somehow, neither reality cancels out the other, but both belong. And the trouble comes when we become hypnotized by only leaning one direction, right? Have you ever noticed someone who became so captured by something that happened years ago that it became the only story they could tell? Every conversation circled back to it, every new experience got interpreted through it. They couldn't quite let it go. Maybe you've been that person. I know I definitely have. But the opposite also happens too. Some people become so obsessed with controlling the future that life becomes exhausting. They hold on with white knuckles. Every uncertainty then becomes a threat. Every unexpected turn feels like a failure. And if life doesn't unfold according to the plan, everything feels like it's falling apart. Maybe you've been there too. I certainly have. And yet, somewhere between these two extremes, something sacred happens. Not by choosing the past over the future or the future over the past, but by learning to live in the flow between them. And this has become one of my favorite images, which is the image of having open hands. Because open hands can receive, but open hands can also let go. And you can't do one without the other. Closed fists can't receive anything new. They also can't release what they're already holding. Only open hands can participate in life as it actually is. Do you see that? That's where the sacred begins to emerge. Not in controlling, not in clinging, but in participating more fully in what is becoming. During our last series, we spent a week talking about the mystery of the present moment, and this insight feels related to that, but maybe just slightly different. Because tonight, I want to say something even more specific. The peace of life isn't found by trying to pause it. The beauty of life isn't found by preserving it as it actually or exactly as it is. The sacred isn't found by escaping change. It's actually found by surrendering into the flow of becoming itself and by participating more fully in our own becoming. One of my favorite theologians, Roland Faber, says that we're invited to understand our lives not primarily through the lens of loss, but instead through a cycle of love that continually is flooding the world with creative renewal again and again and again for almost unimaginably infinite futures. And I love that image because it doesn't deny grief. That's not its intent. It's not there to minimize suffering. It doesn't pretend everything happens for a reason. It simply suggests that love keeps creating on the other side, keeps responding, keeps making something new, keeps alluring us again and again and again. And maybe this is true not only of our own lives, but also of our life together. When we look at the challenges of our world, we see violence and polarization and ecological crisis and loneliness and injustice. It's easy to believe that loss is the truest story we can tell. But if love is fundamentally creative, then our calling isn't simply to mourn what's broken, but to participate in what it's becoming. Some seasons of our lives are genuinely heartbreaking, and some are filled with delight, some of them are confusing, and some are breathtaking. But all of them are real, and none of them need to be denied. Even in times of deep suffering and fragmentation, the future remains genuinely open, which means our work is not to control the outcome, nor to despair that nothing can change, but to participate more faithfully in what love is creating next. Every act of compassion, every pursuit of justice, every gesture of reconciliation becomes one more way we cooperate with the creative transformation that's always at work in the world. So, if reality itself is held within this larger cycle of creative love, then even grief does not get the final word. Even loss can eventually nourish new forms of beauty we couldn't have imagined while we were inside it. And it needs to be said that that doesn't erase pain whatsoever. It simply means pain isn't the whole story. You know, the author Pema Chodron says something that I return to often. She talks about how the magic is found in neither repressing nor overindulging what's happening. Just think about that for a minute. Neither repressing nor indulging, because those are usually our two instincts, aren't they? We either push our emotions away or we become completely consumed by them. We suppress them or we drown in them. But perhaps she offers us another way. Perhaps openness is something quite different. Perhaps openness means allowing joy to arise without clinging, allowing grief to arise without becoming trapped, allowing anger to speak without becoming our identity, allowing fear to visit us without giving it permanent residence. You know, the goal in some sense is simply letting life move, come and go and breathe and flow. And I increasingly wonder if this is one of the deepest spiritual practices there is. Not fixing ourselves, not perfecting ourselves, not even understanding ourselves completely, but just trusting that this force of creative transformation is already at work within us. You know, the Celtic poet and philosopher John O'Donohue talked about how his sense is that the soul choreographs this process uniquely for each person. That means, unfortunately, no one else can do it for you. Not me, not your therapist, not your spouse, not your children, not even your closest friends. They can each accompany you, they can love you, they can witness you, but only you can deepen the trust of belovedness within yourself to go on the journey. Which means that spirituality becomes less about forcing transformation and more about cooperating with it, listening for it, making space for love, allowing the body to do what bodies have evolved to do, to feel, to tremble, to breathe, to grieve, to rejoice, to metabolize experience and emotion, to carry us through one season into another. And the sacred, I think, emerges whenever we trust that process, whenever we surrender just enough to let life keep unfolding in us and through us. And my hunch is that over time, something begins to change. What begins as an intentional practice slowly becomes our instinct. It's like learning an instrument or riding a bicycle or becoming fluent in a language. At first, everything requires effort, doesn't it? But then little by little over time, the body remembers. Eventually, openness becomes less something we do and more something that we are becoming. Maybe you felt that in your own journey with Christianity or whatever spiritual path you've been on, that slowly over time you've become more open, more embracing. And maybe that's what spiritual maturity really looks like. Not certainty or perfection, not always feeling peaceful, because it's not about a feeling, but learning over many years to live with open hands. Hands that can receive this moment completely, whatever it brings. Hands that can release it when its time has passed. Hands that trust that life is always making room for another beginning. Because the sacred isn't waiting somewhere at some destination beyond change. The sacred is already moving within it. And the sacred is this endless becoming, this beautiful rhythm of holding and releasing, of dying and rising again, of remembering and imagining, of grieving and rejoicing. And maybe tonight, that's all we're being invited into. Not to figure life out, not finally to get ahead of it, not somehow to stop the clock, which we can't do anyways, but simply to participate, to notice, to soften, to give ourselves back to the world, and to trust, to let ourselves become. Because every moment that slips through our fingers isn't disappearing into nothing. It's becoming part of the larger story of love that is still unfolding, and every one of us, from each of us personally, to our families, to our country, and in our world, are one of love's unfinished chapters. Okay, I'm looking forward to talking about this with y'all tonight. So here are the 3 contemplative questions for conversation. And the first question is the self question. Have you ever had one of those moments where you suddenly realized time was passing? What was happening, and what did that moment awaken in you? And the second question is the sacred question. Tonight, we suggested that the sacred isn't beyond change, but actually within it. Where have you experienced that to be true as you've grown? And lastly, the society question. How do we hold both honest grief about the world and genuine hope for its transformation without falling into despair or naive optimism? Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, visit www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.